this PowerPoint started. So real quickly, before we kind of get to the meat and potatoes of the webinar, just a little bit about me. Did my undergraduate, I was pre-med, psych, bio, and chem. Went to naturopathic school at SCNM and completed a family practice residency at SCNM. Then I got the teaching bug. I loved teaching and loved family medicine and family practice, but I really found a passion for myself in public health and in creating policy. And so my career took a turn, and I went and got my master's in public health, as well as a certificate in association management, and that is where I am today. So why should you care about social media? Well, when I started naturopathic school back in the Stone Age, we were not really covering a whole lot. There was a very nascent, online component of life. And in fact, I remember when I had originally put up a website for myself in the early 2000s, folks were like, "Oh, wow, you're doing a website." It was kind of unique. And now, I don't think you could probably exist without a really solid website and social presence. So today we're going to be covering how you can maximize that and really share the best of what you have with folks who need to see it. So why should you care about social? Well, employers are checking this out. Prospective patients are also as well. So they are looking you up. And really, what is your professional name, and how can you bring value to your professional name and make yourself known for what you're really good for? So digging for digital dirt. Now, this is one slide that I love to share with folks. So when researching candidates online, employers say they're looking for the following. They're information that supports qualifications for the job, if the candidate has a professional online persona, what other people are saying about that person, and reasons not to hire the candidate. So did you know that over 90% of recruiters are actually looking for your online profiles, and approximately 4% are not? That's a pretty big span. So the bulk majority of people are looking at your persona, at what you've got online. And so it's really important that you make sure your best online foot is forward. Let's advance that slide. So first social media tip. Media tip number one, do you Google yourself regularly? I know I do. And, it's kind of one of those things, are you running credit reports on yourself? Are you checking your credit? Well, your social media credit is just as important right now in the business world. And so I very, very much recommend Googling yourself regularly and making sure that you know what shows up, what's ranking. If you're putting a lot of energy into creating content and and creating an image online, you want to make sure that what you're doing is working. It also gives you some insight if there are some less than favorable things that are showing up as well. So I definitely recommend doing regular Google searches for yourself, every few weeks, at a minimum every month, just to kind of stay up to date on what's out there, especially if you're putting out a lot of information. So top social networks that have been used for recruiting, and this is from 2012, but it really does stand to reason for today as well. So LinkedIn obviously is one of the number one places that recruiters are going to go to, and you would be surprised. I'm in the regular business of hiring folks, whether it's for permanent or temporary positions, and one of the first things that I do is I go to somebody's LinkedIn page. And so it's really incredible to me, especially when we're in the business of business, how many folks don't have their LinkedIn pages up to date, or have typos in them, or the page just doesn't really look like it's been attended to in a very long time. And so one of the first places that I always tell folks to start when they're looking at looking at their social media presence is get your LinkedIn in line, and make sure that you've got some comments, you're posting things that are relevant. Remember that LinkedIn is a professional network, so whereas things like Facebook and Twitter may be more appropriate to have pictures of your kids and family stuff and personal things, LinkedIn really should be the place where you have your personal or professional, rather, your professional brand. And so we'll get into branding in a little bit. But that's one of those areas that I always tell folks, and you can see from this slide, 93% of recruiters are checking LinkedIn out, and but a larger percentage too are also checking out Facebook. And so really making sure that your social media reflects what you want it to reflect. So only, like I said earlier, only 4% of recruiters are not using social media in the recruiting process, and so that is a really big component to this. So building your brand beyond colors and fonts. So it's so funny. I have whoops, didn't mean to go there first. Let's see here. Sorry about that. So I've helped a lot of colleagues of mine, and over the years, talking about branding, and people get really bogged down and really passionate and into the details of the colors and the fonts and what does my logo look like. And while all of that's important, you really start, or the starting place of your brand should be some introspection. It should be really a good deep dive into you as a person and what you're passionate about, what your strengths are, and where you want to position yourself as a solution to the issues facing the world, your patients, whoever it is you're trying to target. And so with that brand and building that brand, you really should be thinking of those types of things throughout the course of everything that you're doing. And so whether it's your logo or your website or images that you're taking of yourself for your website, you shouldn't even go there and start doing all of that and spend money and spend time and resources until you have gotten really solid on where your brand is and where you want to and how you want to position yourself. So here's the slide. Number one rule of marketing. So the number one rule of marketing, anybody know it? Raise your hands. I don't know if I can see hands being raised here. Let's look if I can see the attendees and the audience. I'm not seeing any hands. I don't think we can do that. Oh, there's a hand. Hi, Emily. So one of the things that we think of when I think of marketing is the number one rule, and that is know your audience. And so what does that mean, know your audience? Well, know your audience for me means who is the prime person that is going to be the person who's going to be interested in you and what you're selling. And if you're selling a practice, or you're selling a book, or you're selling something on the internet, you need to know who is going to buy that and who is going to be the most likely person to be interested in what you've got. And so how do you do that? How do you go about knowing your audience? Well, you can hire a $100,000 marketing firm and get really into the weeds with market research and all of that, but most people outside of larger companies aren't going to be able to swing that. So the easier way to do that is you can do some qualitative analysis. You can do a little bit of qualitative research and kind of pick the brains of local folks, and again, what is it that you're selling? And so part of that market research that you would be doing is who else is selling what you're selling? Who else is doing what you're doing? And who's doing it well? So as you check out who's doing things well, knowing your market, knowing your audience, you can really start to drill down on what that person looks like. And so some of the things that you will want to know about your quote unquote audience are things like age and gender, personal interests, where they shop, the types of things that they look at, online, the places where they go, and all of that will impact potentially if you buy ad space, or if you're buying ad space, or you're looking into ad space anywhere, that will impact, because your ad is going to be that much more impactful and valuable to you if you can drill down on your audience. Now, a lot of people will think, oh, well, we just cast a big, huge net out there and we'll see what comes in. And while that can, that can work for some types of things, really drilling down and getting very specific about your audience will make your marketing go a lot further. And so that would be a really good first place that I would recommend people starting when they're looking into any type of marketing and into any type of kind of personal branding. So it's knowing your audience, understanding their behaviors and habits, and being able to target whatever messaging it is to answer the problems and the questions that they have. And again, we will be taking questions later on, so if you have those, we'll be covering those in a little bit. So again, that target audience, you want to drill down, you want to get as specific as possible. And one thing, it's really funny when we think about how to make an impact on your target audience. So how many times do you think somebody needs to see something before they actually make a decision to have an action on it? So, a lot of times we'll call buttons or things like that calls to action. So what is that call to action? It's telling somebody, here's what I want you to do. Here's how I measure if I've been successful in my marketing. And so a call to action, while somebody may see it, they may not act the first time they see it. Just random number, pick a number in your brain and think how many times somebody needs to see something before they actually take action. 1, 2, 3. Oh, I see a hand. Let's see. 7 times. So it's typically referred to as the 7 touches of marketing. And so in the 7 touches of marketing, it's really about how many times you have to have something in front of somebody. So one time maybe a Facebook post, another time maybe an ad that they see, another time maybe a newsletter link or something like that. But in traditional marketing, it's known that it takes about 7 of those different touches before somebody actually takes a step and goes in your direction. So in developing that brand, you really want to be seen as the trustworthy source for information. And so everything else all roads lead to pointing you as the trustworthy source for the information that's being promoted. So if that is your business, your practice, etc., everything really should be about that trust and that identity and building yourself as the expert for whatever it is that you are positioning yourself to be. So when we think about branding, there are lots of different ways to do this. And again, this is kind of the $100,000 marketing PR firm drilled down into 20 minutes. So take it for what it's worth. You're definitely not going to learn everything there is to learn in branding and marketing today, but we will do our best to kind of give you some of the basics and just so that you know what's needed. So features and attributes. So the most distinguishable thing about what you're selling. Very often I will see websites and there'll be lots and lots of words and lots of bullets and lots of busy things. And it says a lot, but it doesn't really say anything. And I don't know if that makes sense to you all out there, but many people will say a whole lot of things and they'll talk and talk and talk, but they're not saying anything truly distinguishable about what that value proposition is. What is so special, so distinguishable about you that makes somebody want to choose you or your product over something else. The other thing that I will often see from folks is, it's got to be a benefit to the user. Again, what's that rule number 1? It is know your audience. And so, a lot of people will get into the habit of talking about themselves and talking about all the wonderful things that they do and but what is the benefit to the user? And, one of the things that I've seen as an employer myself, very oftentimes, when I'm interviewing folks, especially younger people who haven't maybe had too many interviews under their belt yet, they spend a lot of time talking about themselves and all of the things that they need. Oh, well, I really, I'd love to have a job that can do this and this and this and this. But what they negate to think about is that job is really to help the employer. And so what is it that you bring to the employer? How can you make their life easier, better, they're stronger, faster, fabulous, more fabulous because you're there? And that rule, and honestly, that piece of advice goes for searching for a job, patients, anything that you're doing in your professional career, is what are the tangible benefits, again, to that target audience, that user? Who's your target there? And what are you going to do to make their life better? Then you've got the component of emotional benefits. Can you elicit an emotion in someone and make them really feel that this is absolutely where they need to be? Brand product persona, so manifesting the brand in human characteristics, and again, making that position the essence and the whole idea of why you're important. And so whether the brand is you as a doctor or your business, all of these are really vital to make sure that you're including. So kind of along the lines of branding is really this concept of who are you? And so as I said earlier, there's a very big part of this that nobody else is going to be able to answer for you. And that is, who are you? These are the types of questions that, maybe you go to a business coach and you drill down on, or you do some journaling, or you have a mentor who you can bounce ideas off of. But getting into the core of who you are and is really important. So this is self-awareness. What are you good at? What do you love? What are the areas that maybe you need to develop a little bit further? What things absolutely turn your stomach? Don't do those. Trust me, there are plenty of people who get into certain aspects of, working, and they're like, man, I hate this. I hate this part of the job. And so, there are two ways around that. A, don't do the job if it curdles your stomach that much, or B, hire out for the things that you really don't like to do. Because what will happen is it's going to take you way longer to do the things that you don't like to do, and take away from your time and your skills and your ability to focus energy on the things that you really do love and you are good at. And then ultimately, as part of that self-awareness, the last point is probably one of the more important points, is what's the problem that you want to be the answer to? And so how are you, or what you offer, the solution to a problem? And so, oftentimes when I see colleagues of mine, folks will drill down and they will find that they have a passion about maybe, a component of naturopathic medicine, like botanical medicine or physical medicine, or maybe it's a patient population like pediatrics or oncology. And, within that, it's part of, okay, I love this, but I still need to identify, how am I special? What am I going to bring to the table? What can I do with that patient interaction or that business interaction that's going to be useful and beneficial to folks, and that they're going to seek me out for? So all of that is part of self-awareness, and this will all lead you to strengthening your brand. Now, once you've done that, and once you've done all that digging and you've gotten your answers and you are really clear on where you go, now you start to build your brand. And in building your brand, what, a lot of times what I'll see folks, especially when they start out, is they try and be everything to everybody. And you end up nothing to no one. And so, really getting clear on your brand and being excellent at it is probably one of the best things that you can do for yourself professionally. So you get really clear image on who you want to be, how you want to portray yourself, and then you go after it full on. You know, I've talked to doctors, and many successful doctors, they'll say to you, you know, yeah, I've been able to get myself to a work week of 3 or 4 days a week, and the rest is, you know, patient time or speaking or lecturing or what have you. But I would be hard pressed to find one doc who's gotten successful who didn't really bust their tail, you know, and put everything they had into really creating their brand, creating their own personal mission statement. What do they value? What's their what's important to them? And put a lot of work into all of that in the front end. And again, I hope all of this is helpful for you. So I already talked about that rule of the 7 touches of marketing. And again, it doesn't have to be 7 newsletters. In fact, you're probably better off if you are diversified in how you're addressing people. So, you know, maybe somebody has heard you talk at a, you know, on a webinar, and maybe somebody has gotten a newsletter from you, or you know, or seen an ad, or seen a Yelp review, and all of those things. Now, finally, oh wow, you know, I've been thinking about this for a while, and this is the direction I should go. And it's amazing, and they've done research on this, and they've studied it, and it typically just about takes 7 times of seeing something for folks to go and make a determination on it. So, you know, here's just a little bit of demographic data. And again, depending on the demographic that you are personally targeting, you know, the type of behavior and where folks are going to be at for your marketing to stick is going to be dependent on who you're targeting. So again, with this demographic data, just understanding that this is, you know, part for this demographic specifically, and then as you get into different demographics, the audience may be different, as well as the messaging. And so so the average time on social for these different age ranges is here on this slide, and you'll see that you know, the time on social media actually is greater for females, percentage that's spent on social, but it's increasing for males. So males are increasingly on social media more than they had been, but and adults as in general. And I think as we see things progress, you know, people who were kids and who are on social media, a lot are going to become adults who are going to be on social media. So this, as an area where we're paying attention, is really one that it's a long time commitment to. So now on to content. So many times people will hear the phrase content is king, or queen, or empress, or emperor. I don't care which way you call it, but content is extremely important. And so what is content marketing? A lot of times you'll hear folks talking about content and content marketing. So content marketing is basically creating content, whether it is a picture, an infographic, a blog, an article, getting quoted in an article, that will get you in front of your audience. And you can maximize that with some search engine optimization tools, and making sure that you're using keywords for the types of things people are searching for. But at the end of the day, again, you want to be coming up in content that is being searched for organically. And so again, that goes back to that #1 rule: know your audience. What do they want to know about? What are they looking for? What are they interested in? And then what do you have to say? And that area in between is the relevant area. So if you find that they're interested in certain types of things, then you should be saying the things, or at least in general, pointing to the things that they're interested in, and that's having relevant content. And so as part of creating that content, there is some research that goes into what people are searching for, what they're looking at. And, you know, if you don't want to hire big, expensive marketing firms, you can train yourself up on that as well, and learn little by little on how to get up to speed there. So content strategy. So it's the who, the how, the what, the why, the when, and then the when again. And so the who, again, that's #1, know your audience. And then the how. Now, this is an important tool, and this is a really important point I hope you pay attention to. So it's selecting the right channel for your audience. So a lot of times, I'll see folks and they'll post the same exact thing on Facebook, on LinkedIn, on Twitter, and very similar content across all of these mediums, not realizing that the audience of each of those is going to be and will often be very different, and the types of messages that play in one social realm may not play well in another one. And so making sure that you're selecting the right channels and the right messages for those channels is really important, and knowing where your audience is going to be. A lot of times I'll also see people and they're focusing. I've got a friend of mine, and she's been focusing so much on one social media channel, and I said, hey, where's your audience at? And she kind of looked at me and she's like, oh, what do you mean? And she was, a little upset that lots of doctors were not liking her stuff. And I'm like, who is your patient? Is it us, the doctors? Or, who's the patient that you're really targeting for? It doesn't matter if I like your stuff. I'm not going to see you as a patient, no offense, but who is your audience? And so, I think people will often get all roped into the likes, and I've got have to have a lot of likes on my things. And sure, having engagement is good and it brings reach, but what is even more important is making sure that the right people are liking your stuff. And so if 100 of the wrong people like your stuff and they like it, that doesn't really do a whole lot for you, versus maybe 10 or 20 of the right audience liking your thing. So again, that goes into your content strategy of making sure that you're selecting the right type of content, the right channel, and making your messages relevant to the types of people that you're looking to connect with. Knowing the objective, knowing what you're trying to accomplish by this, what the best location, and then the right timing. It's really funny when you get deeper into the nuts and bolts of marketing. There's something called A/B testing that you'll often get started doing, and that's testing your messages at different times of day. So, okay, if I send this message out at 10 in the morning, what type of engagement am I getting in it? If I send it out at 6 o'clock at night, what engagement am I getting it? And there are a lot of experts out there who will tell you all sorts of things, and which days of the week it makes sense to send things out. And while some of that is very relevant, some of it's also going to depend on who your audience is and when they're looking for your information. And so, that's really important to keep in mind. All right, so content life cycle. So as part of life cycle, so a lot of people will they'll create content, they'll put it out there, and then what happens? So the content is a life cycle, and as part of that, you start with a strategy. So a bunch of years ago, I did my certification in association management, and there was a saying that they had for us that I really take to heart in everything I do. And the acronym for it is SPIE, S-P-I-E. And SPIE stands for Scan, Plan, Implement, and Evaluate. And it's really a cornerstone for probably just about everything that you do in business. So, I very much will see folks, and they'll go directly into the planning and implementing mode, or sometimes straight into implementing without ever having done the scan or the plan. And so by scan, that is coming up with, knowing your market, knowing your audience, knowing what other folks are doing, what's working, what doesn't work, what have other people tried before, where have they failed, what can I learn from that? And so that scan component is really important in any new project that you're going to undertake, whether it's a website or social or building out your business plan or whatever it is. But you really should be starting with scanning the environment, doing your homework, doing your research first. Then you come up with a strategy and a plan, hopefully, that will support where you want to go. And from there, then you can go into creating or implementation. and maintenance of that. And then at the tail end of this content life cycle is an audit, or that's the evaluation part. So we have to take a gander on what we did and what worked, what didn't work, what do we need to tweak and do better next time, or what should we for sure make sure we include next time because it went gangbusters. So all of this is part of the content life cycle strategy for really making sure that you're making the most out of the content you are putting forward. All right, so responding to posts. So remember, social media is social. So when people respond to you, acknowledge it. Say thank you. If somebody follows you, thanks for the follow. If somebody takes the time to make a comment, good or bad, use it as an opportunity. Now, there are times where some of the social media posts, and it's amazing how many people get really brave behind a keyboard and feel that they can say things that are rude or not cool, with that anonymity. But so there is a time and a place to not respond, and that in responding you actually will keep the negativity going. But there is definitely in many cases a really high impetus for responding to anything on social media. But again, that is going to vary somewhat, and will depend on the platform, what you can say. And when it comes to patient care, there are some rules around what you can and can't say as well. So some of that's going to vary and be dictated on the situation. But one of the things that you really should be focusing on is linking your social platforms back to your website so that viewers can find more information. And again, if you've been doing your homework and you've been doing a whole lot of content, you'll have things to link back to. So part of that is having that content strategy and getting lots and lots of good content so that when topics come up, you can say, hey, that question is really awesome. Did you see my blog post on X, Y, and Z where I discussed that? And then they get to your website, and hopefully you've got some ways to gather their information and get an email address and and be able to continue your relationship and nurture that relationship with that person. Lights, camera, action. All right, so let's talk about videos. So videos are one of the things that I talk with my social media crew about quite a bit. And let's see, I'm going to throw my camera on for a second for the video component here. Let's see here. All right, you can see me. Hi. Okay, so right now, you can't tell because it's really humid and my hair is totally falling, but normally if I'm going to be on video, I'm going to take some time and make sure that I look presentable. I'm going to look around and make sure that my background is presentable as well. And so there are lots of kind of quick tips that you can do when you're in video. And why video? Well, video is a huge medium right now. People don't like to read. I joke about it a lot, and we joke about it here at AANMC, but folks don't, they're just not reading as much as they used to. They want it quick. They want something engaging. And so videos really are an important way of getting your messages across. And so with video, there are a lot of things that you can do, and you can do it pretty quickly and pretty effectively. But there are also some pitfalls. And so some of the things that I see with folks, and it always makes me chuckle. So again, number one, remember that rule number one, know your audience. So who is watching your video? What are they looking for? What do they want to know? And get it to them quickly. So now a lot of people I notice are, paying a lot of attention to informal videos. Like folks want to look very cozy and very homey, and that's fine. But you will lose your audience if you don't at least get their attention and do it pretty quickly. So, if you're, adjusting the camera while you're, hey, hi, oh, is this on yet? And they can see a whole bunch of stuff, and they can see up your nose, and you're reaching into the camera and adjusting things, and they're seeing your palms. That's all very distracting, and you don't want all of that to take away from the message that you're trying to get across. And so, you know, if I was on camera and I'm doing all of this and you're seeing my thumbs and you're seeing my hands, and it's really distracting. I know I get distracted, and you know, we'll joke and we'll talk about, you know, what are some of the good things that we see in videos, and what are some areas that you know, videos can definitely take and improvement on. And the starts and stops, I will say, are probably two areas that you should make sure that you're clean on. So there are Bluetooth devices now where you can just click it on and you can already be propped and seated and make sure that everything is where you want it to be. Even if it's an informal video, you still want to make sure that you're coming across professionally, and that all of that is right. So the Bluetooth little starters and stoppers can be really effective, and they're pretty inexpensive. They also, it's amazing how much material and equipment that they make now for doing videos at home. There's lighting, there are cameras, you can even, you know, hook up your phones now to, you know, to be able to do that. They have lavalier microphones that will connect to your phones that are like 20 bucks. And I'm from the days of, you know, doing TV commercials where like you had full lighting crews and sound crews, and you know, hours and hours went into setting up a set in order to make sure that you could get a good shot. And now you can really do so much with just, you know, some stuff that you can buy offline, which is pretty amazing. But that said, so going back to the PowerPoint for a second, so you know that rule number one, but make sure that your camera angle is good, that your sound is good so folks can hear you, because you can have the most amazing message, but if folks can't hear you or they're too distracted by all the other stuff that's going on, that's going to take away from your message. Lighting is also important. You know, so lighting and sound are really two areas that we should be paying attention to. And again, it doesn't have to be, you know, polished TV perfect, but it really does make a difference when your lighting, your sound, and your background are somewhat, you know, looking appropriate. And so, you know, there's a doc who has a really popular YouTube channel, and you know, the way that the background looks, it almost looks like she's in a closet. And you know, if you've ever seen some of those, like, you know, ransom videos, like it's kind of got this view of like she's in this little closet and she's being held captive, and like I should be calling the police to get her out. So you know, just pay attention to your background, to kind of some of the basics, and even moving shots, you know, they can be really exciting and fun, but you know, there are ways of doing that where your message is not distracted from your surroundings and everything going on. So that's the big hint, and I'm going to now make my face go away. So going on, so online video viewers. So 65% of people will watch more than 3/4 of a video. And so by that, so if you're thinking about your video, most people are not going to watch the whole thing. Or if they do watch it, maybe they're going to speed through part of it. So you really do want to make sure that that beginning part of whatever video you're doing, you're not adjusting cameras and doing all of that and losing somebody's attention, or talking about how you're new at this and you're just figuring it out. Folks don't want to know that. They want to just get to the meat and potatoes of what you're trying to say. Years ago, I used to do a lot of dancing, and as part of that dancing, I danced with lots of different partners, and it would always surprise me when I would meet somebody on the dance floor for the very first time, and they would say, you know, I'm not really that good at this. And then they would take me on the dance floor, and I'm like, wow, you just really totally didn't sell yourself very well there. My anticipation is not so high now for this dance. And so if you start a video saying, you know, I'm not really that good at this, or I'm just starting to figure this out, you know, someone who is watching that, their confidence level in you has already kind of come down a few notches. So again, just exude confidence, be happy, be positive about what you're doing. So because again, video is really powerful. The average person now is spending 88% more time on a website that will have video on it. So with that, I am going to wrap this up in a moment. But before I do, I just wanted to share a little bit about you know, why naturopathic medicine has been important to me, and you know, and I hope that this was powerful for you all and helpful for you all. but you know, when I chose to be an ND, being an ND for me really met my vision of being a doctor who addressed the mind, the body, and the spirit of their patient. And it was a way of wrapping all of that into one beautiful package rather than having to do years and years and years of, you know, becoming a physician and studying nutrition and then studying mind-body medicine and studying physical medicine and pulling that all together. And so I hope today has been helpful for you to understand how, if you're passionate about naturopathic medicine and being an ND, how you can get your message across to the folks who need to hear it. Because Lord knows there is such a need for what we do and what we bring to the table. There are lots of sick people who need our medicine. And so I hope that this webinar today has been helpful in helping you all understand what can bring our messages out and get more folks knowing what we do. So again, earlier on, I talked about you know, branding and getting clear on who you are and who you want to be as a professional. And one of the really important areas for that is finding a mentor. So seeking somebody out who is killing it, who is just really doing it really well, whatever it is, and the way you want, and ask them. You know, a lot of times I'll see folks and they'll say to me, well, you know, I don't know, or and I'll say, well, have you asked somebody? Have you asked them to be your mentor? And, you know, most folks will be honored and they'll say, sure, you know, and if they say no, that's honest as well. Maybe they're too busy or they're at a time in their life where they're not able to give back, but don't give up on it and keep looking. So with that, next, we're going to be taking some questions, but before we do, we've got some upcoming AANMC events. So in September, we're hosting a webinar on our favorite herbs to stay healthy, and then suicide prevention in October. So both of those events are with fabulous docs who bring a lot to the table, and so with that, I am going to take some questions. So let's see, I could use some examples of some tangible benefits. All right, so there's a question from Pamela. So as far as tangible benefits, tangible means something that you can touch, right? So tangible benefits to your audience are going to be what is important to them. And, you know, by what is important to them, you know, that can be seeing other patient testimonials, knowing what you have done and what they're signing up for is going to be of value. You know, there are lots of different ways that you can have examples like that that are going to connect with your patients. And so again, from the emotional aspect, you know, health is very personal. And, you know, what gets somebody to take a step and to become a patient and create that kind of relationship often is, you know, it's based on some sort of personal connection and, you know, desire to be better. And so, you know, how do you connect with people so that they want to themselves be their best self and be, you know that and have the faith that you as doctor can do that. All right. Okay, so here's a good question. When is the best time to start a website? I'm going into my first year of naturopathic medical school in September. Congratulations. So, you know, it's really funny. You know, I think, honestly, I don't know that there's ever a bad time to start a website, Emily. But you obviously want to be able to put something into it so that you show up on Google searches. So, you know, you would want to be contributing content or at least making something fresh in a regular, you know, somewhat regular fashion. But getting your website up, getting your SEO the longer and the more credibility your website has as a trusted resource, the better it will rank for future. So, what I've heard from folks is that getting your website up sooner rather than later is actually a good idea. A lot of times I'll see grads and they will, they're just getting ready to graduate and they're like, oh yeah, I should probably get a website up. I'm like, well, getting it up sooner rather than later gives all the search engines more time to classify your information, to rank it. It gives more time for people to go to that website, click on those links, and get you better rankings. So the earlier the better, I would say, as getting your web presence. Even if you're blogging, even if you're creating some content as you're going through school, and you can, again, with that scan component, check out what some current students are doing. What are the ones who are getting really good traction and creating a name and a brand for themselves? Again, remembering that potential employers, potential internships are going to be checking you out. I've been looking for some folks to, just recently to write content for AANMC. And in doing so, what do? I check out what they've already written. I check out if they have a website. Have you, what's your writing style like? Are you writing in the way that I would want to have somebody writing for my organization? And so, all of that is part of how we, how the profession goes about and professionals go about looking for folks. So, the sooner the better, I would say, for getting your web presence started. Okay, so there's another question here. What type of content is appropriate as a student, grad, and early professional levels? Another really good question. So, as a student, talking about things that are important for students are, can be helpful, and making sure that you are not obviously holding yourself out to give any medical advice is really important. So those are the types of things that you'll learn in school, how you should present yourself and what you can be saying or not saying as a student. Obviously, you have to be really careful to not come across like you're giving any type of medical advice because you're not yet licensed. Sorry, I just had to take a sip of water. My throat's getting a little dry. But as you move along in your student body life, you'll see, and again, you can see what types of things students are commenting on, the types of videos that folks are posting about. But all of that is really, part of getting your message out. And so, again, if you're passionate about studying this and you're starting to build a brand for yourself, the content that would support that you're a diligent person, that you're, some of the things that our students post about are the things they're excited about learning about. Like, wow, who knew that I was going to learn this and this and this in school? And so all of that can be part of the content that students put out. We've got some really passionate students who start to get the message out about themselves and make themselves, really appeal to potential employers that way as well. As you move into your professional level, your brand is going to hopefully have been honed a bit more, and so it won't be quite as general. So at the professional level, you're trying to get your name out there. You're trying to establish yourself as a credible professional. And so whatever it is that you're speaking about, you want to make sure that you speak about what you know, and you don't try and, put out anything that is beyond what you're comfortable in covering. Let's see here. Okay, how do you create one? Well, there are lots of ways to create websites, and I don't know that I can do due diligence and get into that here, but there are many, many different ways of creating websites. There are free platforms like WordPress and many others that folks use. But again, doing some scanning, doing some research to find the best platform. There are lots of free and inexpensive ones that exist out there, and so that would be a good place to start. Okay, so here's a good question about Instagram. So is there any formula for creating an ideal presence on Instagram. It's obviously very visual. Let me see, I think I messed up my viewing here. Sorry about that, folks. So Instagram is obviously very visual, and so you want to make sure that anything that you are putting forward is going to be as much of the image that you want to have come forth. And so if folks say typically about 2-ish times a day, Instagram stories get a lot more action and reaction from them as well. And so that is important when you're thinking about what makes sense for posting on Instagram. So if you're trying to get a presence for yourself, those are the types of areas that would make more sense to highlight. I think pictures get to be a little tricky for people in trying to figure out what plays well. But again, making sure that the types of images that you're putting forward are clear and are getting across the message that you're trying to get across. There are also lots of inexpensive and free ways of creating infographics and memes and other types of visuals that can still visually get across your message without having to just focus on pictures so much. But Instagram stories is another way of keeping it going and and having a pretty consistent presence. How would you go about finding a mentor? That is an excellent question. So I always tell folks when you are looking into a career, any career, but especially in naturopathic medicine, that seeking out mentors is important. And so how do you do that? Go where they're going to be. Go to conferences, go to meetings, go to if you're in a state that has an active state association for naturopathic doctors, go to or province for that matter, go to those meetings. Volunteer as a student, say, hey, I'd love to help with your check-in table. Even if you can't afford the cost of the conference, you could very often they will have student volunteers or interns who can help with some of the logistics of the committees and logistics of setting up the conference. And so that's an option if you can't afford the cost of the conference yourself. And so that would be one way, is go where they are, start to mingle, start to network. It's really never too early to get started on your professional trajectory there. And so that would be one of the ways that I would just start and see who you connect with. Mentorship is kind of like dating a little bit. You have to, talk to people, have conversations, see where folks are at, see if they are doing what you want to do more of. And the only way you do that is by meeting people. And so, networking and going to conferences and meetings and such is a really good start to that. I hope that answered that for you. Let's see. How often do you recommend posting videos on social? Gosh, it depends again on the medium and how often you should be posting for engagement. But most of the platforms average about 2-ish times a day. Again, you want to be in front of people enough, but not in front of them so much that you're annoying. And also understanding right now, things like Facebook algorithms that are changing drastically, and certain types of things are playing better on some social media platforms than others. So there isn't like a perfect formula for that, and you will see varying opinions on this because it's not necessarily hard and fast science per se. But typically in like that 2 time a day range is what most folks will, and it doesn't have to be just videos, it can be other things as well, but about 2 times a day is what most social platforms are going to be, at least right now. So one of the last questions, and then we're going to have to wrap this up today. Based on your experience, what are the most interesting topics for people in the health field? So, gosh, that is going to vary. And I don't know that it's, it's the most interesting topics for people in the health field, but what's the most interesting topic for the person you are trying to reach? And again, I hope I'm not too much of a broken record here, but it really does boil down to who your audience is. And so if your audience or your target patient, like if you do women's medicine, then your target patient, your patient is going to be somebody who geographically can get to where your office is located and who is in the age range that would be looking for your services and most likely to be looking for your services. And so that would be a really important area to be paying attention to if you are looking at making sure that you're getting your message in front of the right people and the right message in front of the right people. So, again, it's not so much what are the biggest health topics. Now, lots of people are talking about the opiate epidemic right now. It is huge and it is tragic, and it's really an issue. But, again, lots of people are talking about that right now. And then, in a few months, people are going to be talking about something else. And so again, it boils down to not so much, be the topic du jour per se, but who are you? What kind of doctor do you want to be? Who do you want to treat? Where are the opportunities for finding more of those people? And where do you need to show up so that they know who you are and they know how wonderful you are? So that really is more the route to answer that question, if I could be so direct. So let's see. Okay, so there's one last question, and then we're going to wrap up the webinar today. So it's I've changed during the course of my career. Knowing my audience has changed with my changes, and that makes total sense. Self-knowledge helps, yet it's knowing how others perceive that's the most challenging. So how do you get perspective on how you're being perceived professionally? Well, that's a really fabulous question. You ask. Ask people that you trust. Again, that's where mentorship comes into play. And having, having folks who you trust for honest feedback is really important in having in your life. And, there are lots of times where there are going to be people who, are not going to be honest with you, or, they're scared to be honest with you. But having truly honest feedback and seeking it out is probably the best way that I could say you can go you can approach getting that type of feedback. Now, it has to be done in a somewhat, judicious way. You don't want to ask somebody who doesn't really know you, but, you can just be honest if you've got mentors, if you have people you trust, and say, hey, I've been doing some changes. Do you have a minute? I'd love to, hear about some of your impressions of me and where you think I can improve, and what you think I do well. And I know this is a weird conversation to have, so if you want to have it over wine, that would be fine. But I think that is definitely one way of doing that, is having mentors and having people who you can have those honest conversations with, because it is difficult to, a lot of times we'll go about and we'll think, oh, what I'm doing is awesome, and if nobody's biting or folks are getting bad opinions, another way that sometimes people will do is they'll have an anonymous survey, and they'll put that out, and have a survey go out. And again, it depends on your industry, it depends on what would be appropriate, but having some sort of an anonymous survey is a way of getting feedback Could be, you could send that out to your mailing list of patients and say, hey, we're trying to improve our office and we'd love to serve you better. And so to do so, would you mind taking 3 minutes and answering a couple questions? And that could be another way of getting feedback professionally on like a practice or a business. It's also a really good way to find out how your staff is doing. A lot of times as doctors, you're in the back room with your patient and you have no idea maybe what is potentially going on up at the front or what's happening during phone calls with your office staff that could be killing your practice. And very early on when I was in school, I heard your front desk can make or break your practice, and it's very true. And so, depending on what's happening there, surveys can be an effective way of understanding, especially if they're anonymous. And sometimes you can even have a secret shopper, so somebody who you either pay or trust to pose as a patient, go through the works, go through the process, and give you honest feedback of how the process was doing, and how it's gone. And so that's yet another way to get that feedback on how your business is perceived or you're perceived professionally. And so with that was the last question of the day, and I thank you all for coming. And so with that, we're going to wrap up our webinar today. I hope that this was useful for you all, and that you found some pearls in all of this that will help you on your path. And so with that, I salute you all, and I thank you for coming. Dr. JoAnn Yanez, and this is the end of our webinar, and we hope to see you at our next upcoming ones. Thanks, and take care.